"Excuse me, ma'am, but I think you've mistaken the aisle. Coach is in the back." The words weren't a question. They were a verdict. It was handed down by the flight purser's icy stare, backed by the smug smirk of the businessman in the tailored Italian suit over in 2B. Before Serena Caldwell could even open her mouth, the heavy, silent judgment of the entire first-class cabin crashed down on her, deciding she simply didn't belong. It was a Tuesday morning at Gate 22 of Chicago O'Hare International Airport, aboard would Flight 217 to New York. A flight that was guaranteed not to depart on time, for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with the weather. Serena had been settled into her favorite seat, 2A, for exactly 11 minutes before someone decided she was a problem. Their eyes scanned her oversized navy zip-up hoodie, her gray joggers, and a pair of New Balance sneakers that had seen better days. To them, her very presence was an insult to the first-class cabin. None of the people judging her had any idea that this exact seat cost $4,819 before taxes, paid in full 14 days ago, through a corporate portal she had personally helped build. And they certainly didn't suspect that the battered, cracked Dell laptop resting on her lap was running a security dashboard that she alone in the entire country had the clearance to access. To the untrained eye, she looked like a drifter who had stumbled onto the wrong aircraft. But what they didn't know was that was exactly the point. No one at Nova Sky Corporate knew she was on Flight 217 this morning. No one at O'Hare knew. Her assistant, Marcus, knew. And Marcus was the only person in the building she fully trusted. Because Marcus was the one who, 18 months ago, had quietly handed her an internal complaint report that should have reached her desk 6 months earlier, but somehow never made it past the senior operations manager. The report had 47 entries. 31 of them had been filed by passengers of color. She had read every single page on a Saturday morning, alone in her office, with the door closed and the blinds shut. She had not cried. She had done something quieter and more dangerous. She had made a list. Flight 217 was research. The first-class cabin of a Nova Sky mainline jet smelled exactly the way she had specified it should during last year's brand redesign. A faint trace of cedar and clean linen, nothing aggressive, nothing that would trigger migraines at altitude. It was subtle and professional, the way she believed good hospitality was supposed to feel. The flight attendant who approached her first was a young woman named Deja, according to her name badge. Deja had the polished posture of someone who genuinely enjoyed the job, and she smiled at Serena without hesitation. "Good morning, ma'am. Can I get you started with anything? We heifest water, sparkling, fresh-pressed orange juice this morning." "Still water, please," Serena said. "No ice." Of course, Deja moved on without a second look. Serena noticed this, filed it. That was the thing most people never understood about going dark. It wasn't about catching people doing something wrong. It was about catching the texture of everything. The pauses, the avoidances, the moments when service quietly bent toward one person and quietly away from another. She went back to her laptop and the dashboard, scrolling through route performance data for the Chicago hub. The Q3 load factor on transcon routes was down 4%. She had a theory about why, and she had been sitting on it for a week, waiting for one more data point. She found the data point at 8:47 in the morning, when the boarding door opened again, and a woman came in who made the entire first-class cabin rearrange itself without touching a single thing. Her name was Patricia Holden Marsh. She was 54 years old, a former investment banker turned socialite whose face had been on the Chicago Tribune lifestyle pages more times than the paper's own columnists. She was dressed in an immaculate cream-colored blazer with gold buttons, carried a handbag that cost more than the median monthly rent in Cook County, and moved through the cabin doorway the way a person moves when they have never not once in their adult life, been made to wait for anything. Behind her struggled a young man in a rumpled blazer. Her personal assistant, Leon, was loaded down with 2 garment bags, a box of duty-free chocolates, a neck pillow still in its plastic wrap, and a look on his face that suggested this was not the worst morning he'd had this month. But it was close. The lead cabin attendant, a veteran named Howard, materialized from the galley instantly. Howard had been with Nova Sky for 19 years. He had a commendation on his file for an emergency medical response on a flight to Dallas in 2021. He also had a pattern in his service records that Serena had noticed, sitting in the boardroom at 2 a.m. 3 weeks ago, that she had not been able to stop thinking about. Mrs. Holden Marsh, Howard said, his whole manner shifting like a curtain being pulled back. Welcome back. So wonderful to have you with us again. Patricia Holden Marsh did not look at Howard. She looked at seat 2A. She stopped walking. Her assistant nearly walked into her back and pivoted just in time, stumbling sideways into a storage compartment. Howard. She said the name the way you say a word you are very tired of having to say, slowly, like punctuation. Yes, Mrs. Holden Marsh. Why is someone in that seat? It was not a question. The sentence had no upward inflection at the end. It was a statement of confusion, the way you might say, why is there a dent in my car that wasn't there this morning? Howard glanced at the manifest on his wrist tablet. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. A micro-movement that Serena caught because she had spent years in boardrooms learning to read them. Mrs. Holden Marsh, according to the manifest you are assigned to seat 3F today. It's a window seat on the right side with the same. I always sit in 2A, Patricia said. Still not looking at Serena, I have sat in 2A on every Nova Sky flight I have taken since 2019. Richard Holt knows this. I have spoken to Richard about it personally. Richard Holt was Nova Sky's vice president of premium experience. His name on the internal complaint report appeared 6 times, always in the context of passenger escalations that had been quietly resolved, before reaching anyone above his pay grade. Serena pressed her thumb gently against the edge of her cracked laptop corner. The plastic was sharp. I understand, Howard said. If you'd give me just a moment. I don't want a moment. I want my seat. And here is where it shifted. Because Howard turned toward Serena. He came down the aisle and crouched slightly so he was at eye level with her. His voice dropped to the professional near whisper of a man who believed he was handling something delicately. Excuse me, ma'am. I apologize for the disruption. We have a situation regarding the seating arrangement this morning. The passenger at the door is one of our most frequent premium flyers, and she has a preference for this particular position. We'd like to ask if you'd consider relocating. Serena looked up from her laptop. She did not remove her glasses. Where would I be relocating to? We have a lovely seat available in row 5. It's still. Row 5 is business class, Serena said quietly. Howard's jaw moved slightly. It is still a premium cabin experience. I paid for first class, Howard. She said his name without emphasis, without accusation. Just his name, precise and complete, the way you say a word when you want someone to know you have read the label. I selected this seat specifically. My ticket is confirmed. What you are asking me to do is accept a downgrade because another passenger has a preference. The words fell into the cabin like stones into water, rings spreading outward. The man in 2C had his magazine open, but was not reading it. The woman in 1B had gone very still. Patricia Holden Marsh had walked down the aisle by this point. She was standing directly beside Serena's seat now, close enough that the scent of her perfume was present and deliberate. She looked down at Serena the way you look at something you cannot quite categorize. I don't know what upgrade deal or companion pass got you into this cabin, Patricia said, and her voice was not raised, which was somehow worse than if it had been. But you are clearly not a regular here. This is not personal. It's about the fact that some people make this airline run, and some people are along for the ride. I suggest you take the offer and move to wherever they're putting you, and we can all get on with our morning." The cabin went very, very quiet. Not the quiet of people minding their own business, the quiet of people who had heard every word and were deciding, very quickly, what to do with the information. The man in 2C folded his magazine. He did not put it down, he folded it, like he was trying to make himself smaller inside it. Deja, in the rear galley doorway, had frozen with a bottle of orange juice in her hand. Leon, Patricia's assistant, had found something fascinating to examine on the ceiling of the overhead compartment. Serena looked at Patricia, not through her, at her, the way you look at something you are studying, not something that is hurting you. "I'm already seated," Serena said, "and I'd like to stay that way." Patricia's nostrils moved, a delicate, precise contraction. Howard. Howard had gone the color of old paper. "Mrs. Holden Marsh, perhaps I can. Get the head purser, right now." Howard left. He walked quickly toward the forward galley and did not look back. Patricia stood in the aisle with her arms folded, tapping one heel against the carpet, a soft rhythmic sound like a clock counting down. Leon set down one of the garment bags and then immediately picked it back up, as though he had no idea what to do with his hands. Serena turned back to her laptop. She did not close it. She did not stare out the window. She pulled up a new tab in her secure dashboard, entered a 9-digit access code, and opened a subfolder labeled Crew Files, Chicago Hub. She began to read. She already knew what she was looking for. She just wanted to be sure. The head purser's name was Gerald. Gerald Burke. 19 years with Novasky. He came through the galley curtain 30 seconds later with the particular energy of a man who had been told there was a fire and had already decided whose fault it was before seeing the smoke. Gerald's eyes moved from Patricia, and something in them softened immediately, a reflex so practiced it had become invisible to him, to Serena, and something else happened. Something smaller and faster, an assessment, a categorization, a file drawer opening and closing in the span of a breath. "Mrs. Holden Marsh," Gerald said, arriving in the aisle with his shoulders squared. "I am so sorry for this situation. Let me make this right immediately." "Thank you, Gerald." Patricia exhaled like a person who has just been validated after a long injustice. "I have been standing in the aisle of my own aircraft for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Because," she gestured towards Serena without looking at her, a loose wave of the hand, the kind you use to indicate a piece of furniture in a room. This person refused to accommodate a simple request. Gerald turned to Serena. His voice took on a different register, firmer, official. The tone that was not quite rude, but was not quite not rude. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to collect your belongings and move to seat 5D. Mrs. Holden Marsh is a Platinum Legacy partner. Her loyalty to this airline represents—" "What does my loyalty represent?" Serena asked. Gerald blinked. "I beg your pardon." "I have a ticket for this seat. I paid the full published fare. What does that represent to this airline?" "Of course, ma'am. We appreciate all our customers." "Then why am I being asked to move?" The question was not raised. It was not performed. It was just a question, hanging in recycled air, and Gerald had no good answer for it, and they both knew it, and somehow that made everything worse. Patricia stepped forward. She had made a decision. You could see it happen, a visible settling in the shoulders, a lifting of the chin, a commitment to a course of action that a different person might have stepped back from. "Listen to me very carefully," Patricia said, and now she was speaking directly to Serena, close enough that no one in the cabin could pretend they hadn't heard. "I don't know who you are. I don't particularly care. But I know what this airline is, and I know what kind of passenger they built first class for. And I want you to look me in the eye and understand that you are making a scene. You are embarrassing yourself, and you are holding up this entire flight because you cannot read a room." She leaned slightly closer. "Move the seat? Now." Serena looked at her for a long moment. She pressed her thumb against the cracked corner of her laptop again. The plastic edge bit in, small and sharp and real. Then she looked at Gerald. "Gerald," Serena said, "I want you to think carefully about what you're doing. You are threatening to remove a paying first-class passenger from a confirmed ticketed seat to accommodate someone who wants a preference satisfied. That is a violation of Nova Sky's own service equity policy. Section 7, Paragraph 4. You know that policy exists." "I know. You know because I reviewed the last 3 training cycles your team completed, and it was in all of them." Gerald stared at her. His mouth opened, then closed. "How do you—" He started. "Move her," Patricia said, her voice hitting a harder register now. "Gerald, if this woman is still in that seat in 60 seconds, I am calling Richard Holt personally, and I will make sure that your name—" "Mrs. Holden Marsh," Gerald said, finding his footing again, the threat giving him something solid to stand on. He turned to Serena with a new energy, the energy of a man who has just been given permission. "Ma'am, I need you to understand that failure to comply with a crew member's request during boarding is a federal matter. If you do not move voluntarily, I will contact ground security to escort you off this aircraft." The woman in 1B made a small sound. Not a word, just a sound. Serena looked at Gerald for a long time, 3 full seconds, long enough to be felt. Then she closed her laptop. She stood up. She was taller than Gerald had expected. You could see him recalibrate. "Fine," she said. Patricia exhaled with satisfaction. "Smart choice." "I'll move," Serena continued. Her voice had not changed in volume or temperature, but something in it had locked into place. "I will move to wherever you put me, Gerald. But I need you to remember this moment. I need you to remember exactly what you decided today, and why, and who you decided it for." She reached up and pulled her bag from the overhead bin. She slung it over one shoulder. She looked at Patricia. "I'll remember it too," Serena said. Gerald pointed toward the rear of the aircraft. "Seat 22C is available, ma'am. 22. Economy." A middle seat, 4 rows from the lavatory. Serena walked, and the entire cabin watched her go, past business class, past the premium economy curtain, past the families and the students and the people who had packed sandwiches because the airport food was too expensive. She found 22C between a retired schoolteacher named Walter, who smelled faintly of menthol, and a young woman named Priya, who was holding a sleeping infant against her shoulder and looked like she had not slept in 36 hours. Serena sat down. She did not complain. She did not make noise. She pulled out her phone. She opened the secure app she used only for internal escalations. She typed a message to her head of operations, a woman named Diane Torres, who was currently sitting in the Nova Sky corporate offices on South Michigan Avenue, 8 miles away. The message was 4 words, Code 0, Flight 21sen. Then, she put the phone face down on the tray table and looked at Priya, who was trying to rearrange the baby without waking it and failing. "First flight with her?" Serena asked, nodding toward the infant. Priya looked up, startled that anyone was talking to her. "Second. But the first one I'm doing alone." She laughed quietly. The exhausted laugh of someone running on empty. "She's been crying since we left Indianapolis." "How old? 4 months. Does she have a pacifier? I forgot it." "I know. I'm an idiot. You're not an idiot." Serena looked toward the galley. Two flight attendants were visible through the parted curtain, talking. Neither one had come through economy since the plane had been boarded. "Do you have any water on you?" "Just what's in her bottle." "She needs more formula, actually. I packed it separately, and now it's in the overhead in row 4, and I can't—" Serena stood up before Priya finished the sentence. She walked to the rear galley. A young attendant named Kevin was refilling a tray of small pretzels and did not look up. "I need a bottle of warm water." Serena said. "A small carton of formula if you carry it, and whatever passes for juice back here." Kevin looked up. His expression contained the specific irritation of someone who has been interrupted. "We haven't started service yet." The seatbelt sign, Kevin, just his name. "There is a 4-month-old infant in 22D who needs formula, and there is a mother who needs water, and I am asking you to provide those things because that is your job." Something in Kevin's face shifted. Not chastised, exactly. Confused, more like. The way you look at someone when the authority in their voice does not match the seat number they came from. He got the water. He found a formula packet in the emergency supplies kit. He did not apologize, but he was faster than he had been a moment ago. Serena brought the items back to Priya. She helped warm the water by wrapping the bottle in a napkin she'd asked for. Within 4 minutes, the baby was eating, and the crying had stopped. And Priya was looking at Serena the way people look at someone who has just diffused something. "Thank you, seriously." Priya looked down the row. "Why did they move you back here?" "I saw what happened, up front." "That woman was." "It doesn't matter," Serena said quietly. "Are you okay?" Better now. Walter, the retired teacher on Serena's left, had been pretending to read a John Grisham novel for the past 7 minutes. He lowered it now. "For what it's worth," Walter said, his voice a careful murmur, "that was wrong. What they did to you. Every one of us back here saw it." "I know," Serena said. "Thank you, Walter." He blinked. He hadn't told her his name. She was already looking at her phone. Diane's response had arrived. "On my way. Ground team is standing by." "Do you want extraction or observation?" Serena typed back. "Extraction." "But not yet. Give me 10 minutes first. I want to see the full picture." She turned her phone over and looked at the back of the seat in front of her. The fabric was slightly worn at the corner of the tray table latch. She had approved a seat refurbishment contract 8 months ago. She made a mental note to check the completion report when she was back in the office. The minutes passed. The plane did not push back. In first class, Patricia Holden Marsh sipped a glass of champagne and adjusted the temperature of her seat. Gerald had personally brought her a warm towel and a menu, and she had accepted both with the ease of someone who expected them. Howard had retreated to the forward galley and was doing something with napkins that required no eye contact with anyone. The couple in seats 2C and 2D were not speaking to each other, which may or may not have been usual for them. At 9 minutes and 43 seconds after Serena's text to Diane, the boarding door made a sound. Not the hydraulic sealing sound of a door being locked for departure. The other sound, the unlocking sound. The sound the door makes when someone is coming in from outside. It was a sound the crew had not heard since the plane was at the gate, and the plane was no longer at the gate. Gerald emerged from the galley in a rush, his voice tight. "What is? That door is sealed. We're past." 3 people boarded. The first was Diane Torres, Nova Sky's chief operating officer. She was 51 years old, wore a charcoal suit that cost $2,200 and showed no evidence of it, and walked onto a moving aircraft with the unhurried certainty of someone who had just stopped a clock. Behind her was the company's general counsel, a man named Robert Finch, carrying a black leather portfolio. Behind Robert was a uniformed officer from O'Hare Airport Authority who positioned herself near the forward galley door and said nothing. Gerald stopped 3 feet from Diane Torres, with his hand still raised in the gesture of someone about to explain something. "Ma'am, this aircraft was cleared for departure, and the door has been—" "Gerald Burke," Diane said, reading from her tablet without looking up. 19 years with Nova Sky. Commendations for service excellence in 2018 and 2020. She looked up now. "And a personnel file I've been reviewing for the past 9 minutes that I should have looked at a great deal sooner." Gerald went the color of chalk. In first class, Patricia Holden Marsh had turned around in seat 2A. She was watching the forward section with the focused attention of someone who believed the theater was for her. Finally, Patricia said loudly enough to be heard, "Someone from management. I want to speak to whoever is in charge about the absolutely unacceptable handling of this situation." Diane Torres looked at Patricia, the way you look at a sign in a language you don't read, briefly, without engagement, and then turned and walked down the aisle. Not toward Patricia, away from her, past the first-class seats, through the curtain, into business, into premium economy, down the length of the aircraft as passengers craned and turned and whispered. The cabin went so quiet that you could hear the ventilation system. Diane reached row 22. She stopped. She looked at Serena, who was sitting in the middle seat between Walter and the baby, her laptop closed, her bag on her lap, looking for all the world like someone who had been waiting patiently for a connecting flight. Diane Torres did not say anything for a moment. When she did speak, her voice was steady, but the people in rows 20 through 24 would later describe it as the kind of voice that makes rooms remember themselves. "Miss Caldwell," Diane said, "I'm sorry it took us this long. The perimeter is clear. We're ready when you are." Walter looked at Serena, then at Diane, then at Serena again. Priya looked up from her baby. Serena unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood. She turned to Walter. "Thank you for the company, Walter." Walter could not form words. He nodded. She turned to Priya. "The flight is going to be delayed. But my assistant will be waiting for you at the gate before you reboard. Hotel, transport, and a direct rebook. No cost to you. Just tell them Serena sent you." "Who?" Priya said. "Who are you?" Serena smiled at her. A real one, unguarded and brief, and completely her own. Then she turned and walked back up the aisle. And something happened that no one in the plane expected, including Serena herself. It started with Kevin, the flight attendant from the rear galley, who had watched the whole thing from the curtained doorway. He started clapping. Not a big dramatic clap. A single person, quiet, ein eye, that built slowly because Walter joined in. And then the young couple in row 19, and then a businessman who had been on his laptop since boarding and had apparently been watching everything through the gap in his seat. By the time Serena reached the business class cabin, it had become something. Not applause for a performance. Applause for a reckoning. Serena did not pause. She walked through it. She walked through the first-class curtain. Patricia Holden Marsh was standing. She had her phone in her hand. Her face had completed a journey in the past 3 minutes that would have been remarkable to watch in time-lapse. From settled triumph, to confusion, to something tightening around the eyes that was not quite recognition, but was close. "What is this?" Patricia said. It was not a question. It was the same sentence she had used at the beginning. The same construction, but the certainty had gone out of it, leaving only the shape. Serena stopped in front of her. She reached into her bag. She pulled out a small card, a Nova Sky corporate access card, the kind that opens the buildings and the boardrooms and the servers and the financial records. She held it up long enough for Patricia to read the name and the title printed beneath it. Serena Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer. "The seat you're sitting in," Serena said quietly, "belongs to my airline. The champagne you're drinking came from my inventory. The carpet under your feet was part of a $47 million cabin refurbishment project I signed off on last April." She tilted her head slightly. "I paid full fare for seat 2A. You did not." Patricia's mouth opened. Serena continued, "Is currently on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. So that call you were planning to make won't connect the way you're hoping. You can't." Patricia's voice had cracked somewhere in the middle of the second word and not recovered. "Do you know who my family is?" "My husband sits on the board of Robert." Serena said the general counsel's name without turning around. Robert Finch stepped forward from behind her shoulder and placed a single document on the armrest of seat 2A. Patricia looked at it. The Nova Sky letterhead was visible from 3 feet away. "That," Robert said pleasantly, "is a notice of permanent revocation of your Nova Sky Platinum's Legacy membership, effective immediately, pursuant to Section 14 of the Passenger Conduct Agreement you signed when you enrolled. It also formally notes that your behavior this morning has been recorded by multiple sources, including the aircraft's own interior cameras, and no fewer than 4 passenger devices." He paused. "Your lawyer will want to know about the cameras in particular." Patricia looked at the document. She looked at Serena. She looked at the document again. She had the expression of someone who has just understood, too late, that the door they slammed on their way out was the door to the only room they were allowed to be in. "Gerald." Serena turned to the purser, who was standing near the galley, with the posture of a man who was sincerely reconsidering every professional decision he had made in the past 2 decades. "And Howard." She looked at the flight attendant, who had found something to arrange and rearrange near the overhead bins. "This conversation will happen in the executive suite in Terminal 2, not here. Not with the passengers watching." She looked at them both for a moment. "But it will happen." Gerald swallowed. His throat made a sound. "Diane," Serena said. "Airport Authority has a holding room at Terminal 2 available," Diane said. "Mrs. Holden Marsh will be escorted there while we process the conduct incident. Her baggage will be removed from the aircraft." Patricia's voice had returned, but it was different now. Higher, faster, the register of someone running out of ground. "You cannot remove me from a commercial aircraft. There are laws. I have rights. I will sue this airline into." "You are welcome to speak with counsel," Robert said. He was still pleasant. He was the most pleasant person in the first-class cabin by a significant margin. "I'll let them know about the conduct documentation, the recording timestamps, and the witness list, which currently includes 138 passengers and 7 crew members." Patricia looked around the cabin. The man in 2C was looking directly at her now. The couple in 1B. Everyone who had been pretending not to hear for the past hour. Every face she looked at had already made its judgment and was no longer hiding it. Patricia said, and her voice fractured slightly on the word just. "I only wanted my seat." "I know," Serena said. "That's the part that will stay, with me." She picked up her bag from where it had been placed near the galley. She did not look back at seat 2A. "Ladies and gentlemen," Diane said, stepping to the forward position and addressing the cabin without a microphone, her voice carrying easily in the silence. "This flight will be briefly delayed while we complete a passenger conduct process. We will be reboarding within 45 minutes on a fresh aircraft. You will each receive a full refund and a round-trip first-class credit on your next Nova Sky booking." She paused. "All of you." There was a sound in the cabin that was not quite a cheer and not quite a release of breath. Something between them. Serena walked off the plane. She walked down the jet bridge into the terminal. The airport was already full of morning traffic, families and business travelers, and people running for connections with their shoes untied. She walked past all of it. She bought a cup of coffee from a kiosk near Gate 18, paid for it herself in cash, and stood at the window looking out at the tarmac. She was still holding the coffee, untouched, when Diane found her. "Gerald is asking to speak to you before the meeting," Diane said. "He says he wants to apologize." "That's not what concerns me," Serena said. "I know. Pull his service records, full history, and cross-reference the flight data, specifically complaints by cabin section for the last 5 years. I want to know if what happened today is a pattern or a performance." "I already started the pull." Diane hesitated. "It's a pattern." Serena pressed her thumb against the edge of the coffee cup. The cardboard was slightly too hot. "How many?" she asked. "Preliminary count is 63 incidents in the Chicago hub alone." 63 complaints where a premium cabin census was vacated or contested under crew pressure. 44 of them involve passengers whose records include a photo ID indicating they are Black or Latino. Diane's voice was precise and level, the way Diane's voice always was when she was delivering information she was angry about. Gerald's name appears in the crew logs on 31 of those incidents. Serena stood with that number for a moment. 31. Not carelessness, not confusion, volume. What about Richard Holt? He received 14 escalated complaints that were marked resolved at his level. None of them were forwarded to you. 14. Serena turned the cup in her hands. I want them all reopened. Every single one. I want the original passengers contacted. I want written acknowledgments sent. And I want Richard in the building tomorrow morning for a formal separation meeting. Done. And Gerald? Diane was quiet for a moment. That's your call. I know. Serena finally drank a sip of coffee. It was slightly too bitter, and the temperature had dropped on the walk from the kiosk. It was fine. Schedule the tribunal for this afternoon. I'll be there. She looked out the window. A Nova Sky 737 was taxiing toward the runway on the far side of the field. A different flight, different crew, 100 different people, going 100 different places, most of them not thinking about any of this. Diane, Serena said. Yes, my father drove an airport shuttle at O'Hare for 22 years. Did you know that? I didn't. He drove the shuttle from the parking garage to Terminal 1. 7 days a week for 6 years, before they let him go to Terminal 3. He used to wave at the planes. Serena looked at the taxiing aircraft. He told me once that the pilots never waved back. He said it like it was just a fact, not a complaint, just a fact. She paused. I bought this airline because I didn't want it to be a place that treated anyone like a fact. Diane didn't speak. Gerald will have a tribunal. The facts will be reviewed. If the pattern is what the data says it is, he's done. Not just suspended. Done. She turned away from the window. And Mrs. Holden Marsh? Airport Authority has her in the holding room. She's demanded her lawyer, who is apparently unavailable this morning. She's also called her husband twice. From what our legal team can tell, he isn't picking up. Cian. Serena allowed herself nothing that was quite a smile. Let her make the calls. The meeting in the executive conference room on the Terminal 2 upper level lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. Gerald Burke sat on one side of the table. Robert Finch and 2 members of the HR review panel sat on the other. Serena sat at the head. Gerald had been with Nova Sky for 19 years. He had a pension. He had a daughter in college in Madison. He had a wife who had sent him a text that morning, wishing him a good flight. He had also spent the better part of 2 decades making a quiet, practiced decision about which passengers got the benefit of the doubt and which ones didn't. He had done it so many times it had stopped feeling like a decision. It had become reflex, instinct, policy, almost in the way that unspoken habits become policy when no one challenges them for long enough. The data panel on the wall showed 63 incidents. Gerald looked at it and did not argue with it. That, in the end, was the thing that held. I followed. What I was standard practice, he said. It was not an excuse. It was a statement of something worse. A system that had made his behavior feel like common sense for long enough that he had never been asked to look at the aggregate. That's the problem, Serena said. You were following a standard. The standard was wrong. And you are a senior enough crew member that you had both the experience and the authority to know the difference, and you chose not to use them. Gerald did not respond. Your employment with Nova Sky ends today, Serena said. Effective immediately. Your pension will be honored as earned. You will receive a letter outlining the specific conduct violations on file. Should you seek future employment in the airline industry, those records will be available to any carrier that requests them. He nodded. Once. Small. Howard, the other flight attendant, received a different outcome. Howard was newer, with a thinner file and a longer conversation ahead of him. He left with a suspension, a mandatory retraining program, and a probationary period that his direct supervisor would oversee personally. Whether he would use the second chance was entirely up to him. Serena had learned to be specific about that. The second chance was offered, not guaranteed. The work that made it real belonged to the person receiving it. Richard Holt's meeting happened the following morning. It was shorter. The 14 buried complaints were laid on his desk, one by Robert Finch, and Richard had nothing to say about them that improved his situation. He was terminated for cause. No severance. The matter was referred to Nova Sky's Internal Ethics Board for further review, and the Ethics Board would decide whether the documentation warranted action beyond the company. It warranted action beyond the company. Patricia Holden Marsh spent 4 hours in the airport holding room before her personal lawyer arrived. The lawyer read the documentation, watched 3 minutes of the cabin recording on his laptop, and told Patricia quietly that she should prepare herself for a civil filing from Nova Sky's legal team, and that he strongly advised against making any public statements. Patricia did not listen to this advice. She posted a statement on her social media accounts at 2:47 that afternoon, calling the situation a misunderstanding and describing herself as a longtime supporter of diversity and inclusion. By 4 p.m., the cabin recording had been viewed 2 million times. By 6 p.m., it was 7 million. The clip that played on a loop was 11 seconds long. It was the moment Patricia leaned towards Serena's seat and said, with complete comfort, as if it were simply a thing that was true, "You cannot read a room." And the caption beneath it in 37 languages said, "She owned the airline." Patricia's phone stopped connecting to her social accounts at 8:30 that evening when the platform flagged the behavior from the comment section. Her husband, Gregory, a partner at a financial consulting group in the Gold Coast, issued a separate statement disavowing Patricia's conduct and noting that the family had made a significant donation to a civil rights organization earlier that year and believed deeply in the dignity of all people. This statement was not received well. Gregory's consulting firm lost 2 institutional clients in the following 48 hours. The Holden Marsh family attorney negotiated a confidential settlement with Nova Sky Legal the following week. Patricia issued a private written apology that Serena read once, sitting at her desk on a Thursday afternoon, and then put in the file without responding to. She did not respond because there was nothing to respond to. The apology existed. It was documented. What it could not do was unteach the 31 people who had sat in economy class because Gerald Burke had decided they belonged there, or return the first-class tickets they had paid for, or give back the hours they had spent navigating what had happened to them, with the particular, quiet exhaustion of people who had learned not to make a scene about it. Nova Sky launched a full audit of all 6 U.S. hubs in April. The audit was led by an independent firm Serena selected herself. It ran for 90 days. The results were delivered in a 214-page report that outlined systemic patterns of disparate service treatment across 4 hubs, with recommendations for retraining, policy revision, supervision restructuring, and passenger redress. The redress process was the one Serena personally oversaw. Letters went out to 63 identified passengers. Each letter acknowledged specifically what had happened. Each one offered a full travel credit and a direct line of contact to Serena's office. 41 passengers responded. 38 accepted the credit. 22 wrote back. Serena read every letter. She had a folder on her desk where she kept them, not digitally, physical paper, in a plain manila folder with no label. Her assistant Marcus asked her once what was in it. Proof, she said, and left it at that. 6 months later, on the first day of October, Serena boarded a Nova Sky flight from O'Hare to New York. She wore a dark green sweatshirt she'd bought at a farmer's market the previous weekend and a pair of shoes that needed to be retired soon. She boarded last after everyone else. She found her way to seat 22C. Middle row, economy, 4 rows from the lavatory. It had. She sat down next to a man reading a library book, and a college student with headphones in who was almost definitely watching the same streaming show the rest of the country had been watching for the past month. The flight attendant came through, a new hire named Becca, 3 months into her first assignment, careful and a little nervous and genuinely trying. "Good morning. Can I get you started with anything?" "Still water, please," Serena said. "No ice." "Of course." Becca smiled with her whole face, the smile of someone who had not yet learned to point it selectively. "It's a great morning for flying. The weather's clear all the way to JFK." "That's the best kind of morning," Serena said. She turned to the window. Far out on the tarmac, a crew was marshalling a plane toward the runway. One of the ground crew was using the orange wands, guiding the nose left, signaling the captain with wide, deliberate arcs. She watched until the plane began to move. Then she opened her cracked laptop, pulled up the quarterly report, and went back to work. The flight left on time. If this story reached something in you, not just the ending, but the quiet in the middle, the waiting, the moment when no one in that cabin moved, click. Like so, it finds someone who needs to hear it today. Share it. If you know someone who has ever been treated like they were nobody in a room full of people who should have known better. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been in that cabin, either seat? I read everyone.